Now, when atoms gain or lose electrons, they form what is called an ion. An ion is a charged particle formed by either the loss or the gain of electrons. Atoms start off neutral. Metal atoms lose all their valence electrons to form metal ions. Because you've lost the valence energy level, the size of the ion will be smaller than the original atom because you're losing the outermost energy level. For example, sodium has a configuration of 2-8-1. When it loses its valence electrons, it goes from having 3 energy levels to only having 2 energy levels, and therefore the radius decreases. When nonmetal atoms form ions, they gain enough electrons to form a stable octet. For example, oxygen is 2-6. To form a stable octet, it has to gain 2 electrons. It's now 2-8. And these 2 extra electrons repel each other, making the nonmetal ion larger in radius than the original nonmetal atom was. Elements that are nonmetals have extremely high electronegativity. Therefore, they tend to gain electrons and form negative ions. How many electrons do they gain to form an ion? Enough to make a stable octet. Carbon has 4 valence electrons, which means it needs to gain 4 more to make a stable octet and form an ion charge of -4. Nitrogen and phosphorus each have 5 valence electrons, which means they each need to gain 3 more to form a stable octet, meaning they'll get a charge of -3. Oxygen, sulfur, and selenium have 6 valence electrons. They need to gain only 2 more to become an ion with a stable octet and an ion charge of -2. And the halogens have 7 valence electrons. They only need to gain 1 more to make a stable octet and an ion charge of -1. Hydrogen very rarely gains electrons. It will gain electrons from metals. Normally, hydrogen will lose electrons. Fluorine has 7 valence electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It needs to gain 1 more to make a stable octet. When it gains that 1 electron, it forms an ion with a -1 charge. Phosphorus has 5 valence electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To form a stable octet, it must gain 3 more. When it does this, it forms an ion with a charge of -3. Metal atoms have 4 or fewer valence electrons, and they lose them all to form ions. The elements in group 1 all have 1 valence electron, which they will lose to form an ion with a +1 charge. All the elements in group 2 have 2 valence electrons. They will lose them both to form a +2 charge. Lithium has 1 valence electron. It will lose its 1 and only valence electron to form a +1 ion. Magnesium has 2 valence electrons. To form an ion, it will lose both of them and become an ion with a charge of +2. Aluminum has 3 valence electrons. It will lose all 3 of its valence electrons to form an ion with a charge of +3. When looking at the subatomic particles in ions, only the number of electrons is impacted. The nucleus is not changed at all when an atom becomes an ion. The number of protons will remain the same, the number of neutrons will remain the same, only the electrons are lost or gained. How many protons, neutrons, and electrons are there in an atom that has a mass of 41, atomic number of 20, which makes it calcium, with a +2 ion charge? Well, 20 means that there are 20 protons. Now, if the atom was neutral, there'd also be 20 electrons, but because it's an ion, the numbers aren't equal. Because the mass number is 41, 41 minus 20 is 21 neutrons. Now, how can the charge be +2? If there's 2 more positive protons, then there are negative electrons. +2 forms by losing 2 electrons. There are 18 electrons. Notice net charge of +20 and -18, the net charge is +2. Naming ions is quite simple. Metal ions keep their name. Sodium is still called sodium. Strontium is still called strontium. Cadmium is still called cadmium. And hydrogen is still called hydrogen. That is if the metal or positive ion only has one positive charge listed. If, on the other hand, there are multiple charges listed for that element, for example, on the periodic table, copper can either be +1 or +2. How do we know which one we have? We put a Roman numeral after the name to indicate what the ion charge is. If it's +1, it's copper 1. Copper with a +2 charge is called copper 2. Manganese has 4 charges listed on the periodic table. Manganese with a +2 charge is called manganese 2. Manganese with a +3 charge is called manganese 3. Manganese with a +4 charge is called manganese 4. Manganese with a +7 charge is called manganese 7. So the Roman numeral tells you which charge of the ion you're dealing with. If there's only one charge, you don't have to worry about it because you can't confuse it with any other charge. Nonmetal ions generally get their first syllable followed by "ide." For example, Cl is chlorine. To make it Cl-1, it's chloride. O is oxygen. O-2 is the first syllable ox followed by ide. C is carbon. Take the first syllable, carb, ide, if you have C-4. So for nonmetals, you take the name, take the first syllable, followed by ide. Here are some examples. Rubidium has only one charge listed. Its ion is called rubidium. Strontium only has one charge listed. Its ion is called strontium. Calcium has one charge listed. The ion name is calcium. Titanium has 3 charges listed. Titanium 2, titanium 3, and titanium 4. Zirconium only has one charge listed, +4. Zirconium would be the name of the ion. Cobalt has 2 charges listed, cobalt 2 and cobalt 3. Nickel has 2 charges listed, nickel 2, nickel 3. Silver only has one charge listed, silver. Gold has 2 charges listed, gold 1, gold 3. Iron has 2 charges listed, iron 2, iron 3. Ruthenium only has one charge listed, ruthenium. Technetium has 3 charges listed, technetium 4, technetium 6, technetium 7. Tungsten only has one charge listed, therefore its ion name is tungsten. Bromine is a nonmetal. When it forms a -1 ion, it's bromide. Iodine becomes iodide. Selenium becomes selenide. Nitrogen becomes nitride. Oxygen becomes oxide. Fluorine becomes fluoride. Chlorine becomes chloride. Sulfur becomes sulfide. Phosphorus becomes phosphide. And that is how you name nonmetal negative ions.